welcome back to coverage here at GP Phoenix. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm in the booth with Eduardo Sajgalik, and we are all set with two undefeated players here in round number 11. Bryan Rockenbach, he is rocking the white-blue control. I'm assuming there's some Jace Mind Sculptors here, Eduardo?
Yes, there are some.
Yeah, I like that. Jace Calloway on the other side. Affinity. Both of these players neglected to lose a game yesterday and today thus far.
Yeah, just piloting two very powerful modern archetypes. White-blue control, a deck that kind of came out of Ixalan proper. Field of Ruin really giving that deck its chance to shine, giving it a plan. The Affinity deck has been around for like almost at least half a decade in modern. Yeah. As for how we're going to see this matchup play out, I usually give the edge in this matchup to Affinity, since unlike, say, a Jeskai control deck, you don't have access to Lightning Bolt. You don't have access to Electrolyze. So your removal is down to Path to Exile. You also are running less Snapcaster Mages, which means that you're interacting not as much with Affinity in Game 1, which makes Game 1 at least unfavorable. Game 2, this can reverse. But yeah, on average, I would say the Affinity player is ahead, especially if they're on the play. And there we go. Mox Opal is a good reason to be ahead.
Yeah, how do you like this start from Shane Calloway? Signal Pest. He's also got an Ornithopter and the Arcbound Ravager. He is just curving out beautifully. In the meantime, Ryan hasn't done a whole lot. You see a Serum Visions from him there, and otherwise he's just hit his land drops and is kind of patiently passing the turn back. But this is where things could get ugly. Now, Memnite's not the worst-case scenario for him.
Yeah, and this looks like very little power, but Shane doesn't really have to commit much more to the board. This Signal Pest is already free damage in itself as a 1-drop. So Shane attacking here for 5 damage and able to, if there were a removal spell to come around, like move things around with Arcbound Ravager. The main thing here is like how Shane is going to commit. Here, one of the more difficult decisions was whether he should sack that Mox Opal or not for damage. I believe it would have been better, seeing that Shane has no other cards and doesn't really require that Mox Opal for colored mana. So I think I would have liked Shane here to sacrifice the Opal to Ravager just to deal that extra damage, because every point of damage really counts when you're playing cards like Galvanic Blast.
Sure.
Just for information, I believe Bryan had access in hand to a Wall of Omens, which you saw there. But decided to not use it so he could have access to Logic Knot in case Shane went for cranial plating.
Right.
Now that Shane has no cards, Bryan's probably going to be more willing to tap out here and just hope to dodge the top of Shane's deck, especially when he has access to the Path to Exile. He did draw one, but he had one before. So with access to Path, he's much more willing to let a cranial plating or a Steel Overseer hit the table here, since he can tempo.
Springleaf Drum is the play here for Shane Calloway. Not particularly exciting, though it is another artifact potentially to be eaten up. And once again, the Blink Moth is going to be chipping in there as well. So he is still able to apply significant pressure here to Bryan, who's had a relatively slow start, but looks like he has at least 2 copies of Path to Exile in his hand right now. Unfortunately for him, he is facing down an Arcbound Ravager. An Arcbound Ravager is kind of an annoying one when you're sitting there with Path to Exile, as it can kind of exchange itself for a bunch of counters on another creature eventually.
Yeah, Arcbound Ravager, very powerful here, because it basically means that you're going to require your opponent to have 2 removal spells, which is asking a lot from the blue-white deck. Here, I think I like Shane sacrificing the Drum and Opal. He's kind of forced to act first here, since he has priority, but it seems like he passed here. I think though, making the Ravager larger and at least forcing your opponent to lose that Wall of Omens or use a Path to Exile and Ravager would have been the play I prefer here, especially because the Springleaf Drum and Mox Opal aren't really necessary. So I think Shane should be converting these cards to damage. So
now Bryan's just going to take a bunch of damage here and then use his Path to Exile on end step. Is that what we're going to see, Eduardo?
Yeah, so Bryan doesn't need to use Path right now, since his main target is either going to be this Ravager, which was blocked, so there was no rush, or he could have targeted something like the Signal Pest, which has evasion. And here, this is actually a really tough decision. Essentially, the typical play here is to put counters on a creature land like Blinkmoth Nexus. That's usually the best plan against control decks because it's harder for them to deal with it. But with the addition of Field of Ruin, the lands have gotten much worse at this job between Spreading Seas and Field of Ruin. So the blue-white deck is actually about as likely to destroy a land than any permanents in play. So Shane is deciding to put the counters on the land here because you have both the Signal Pest and the creatures attacking or the Nexus. And this is why I would have liked to see these Opals and Springleaf Drums sack before, because if Bryan had done it in combat, this would have been additional damage on the Nexus, or the Wall of Omens would have been gone, allowing the Mem Knight to attack for 2 more damage.
Right. Now he's done this, but hasn't garnered the benefit of that damage ahead of time, so he's now relying on this Blinkmoth in a pretty big way. And you see the land drop here from Bryan Rockenbach, Ghost Quarter.
Yeah.
So he's at the ready for that Blinkmoth Nexus, and he still has a backup path to exile. Now, the downside with the Ghost Quarter is that he's not able to cast that Cryptic Command in his hand if he wants to, but he'll live with that. He's got answers for everything he needs right now.
Yeah, Logic Knot for any top decks, Path to Exile for anything on board that might be a problem, and Ghost Quarter. The Ghost Quarter is actually an interesting addition. I mean, you're playing 4 Spreading Seas and 4 Field of Ruin, so that's already a lot. So if you're playing Ghost Quarter, you are specifically targeting Tron-style decks. And I think that's why we're seeing Bryan at 10-0. There were a lot of Tron decks here in Phoenix, and he's really getting the payoff here.
So there's no basics here? What is going on? One mountain. Where is it?
If Shane is deciding not to search,
what does that tell you?
If I'm Bryan, this is like the best possible news.
He has it in his hand?
Yes, because you have to remind your opponent that they have the option to search. Actually, 1 second. This is kind of weird. If there was a Path to Exile, actually the Path to Exile with the Ravager was normal because that was sacked. But
it didn't resolve, right? But this one on the Signal Pest did.
Right, so that tells me Shane drew the literal worst card in his deck in that basic mountain.
Oh, no. Now, of course, Bryan isn't 100% how many basics Affinity runs, but if you study deck lists of Affinity, it's pretty common to see them run 1.
Yes.
That is the normal number. So, ouch.
Yeah, the value from running 1 basic in the face of Field of Ruin and Path is so high that people just run 1. It's very unfortunate Shane literally drew the worst card in his deck. I think like a Mox Opal, a Springleaf Drum, anything would have been better.
God. Jake just with a killer mountain pick there, too. He could have picked the artwork for any mountain in the history of Magic to put on the screen, and he just nailed it.
Yeah. Interesting aspect about that Arabian Nights Mountain. Mountain is the answer to what was the most printed card in Magic because Mountain had 1 additional printing to every other basic. It was the only basic land in Arabian Nights.
Does that make it the best basic land ever?
I think we don't have time over the next 5 hours to really rank all the basic lands.
And you and I have been talking extensively about basic lands already today. That was the topic of Eduardo and I's conversation from Starbucks all the way here and while we were here. We covered a lot of ground, though. I think we really made some headway on the discussion.
Indeed.
Now it's spilled over into work, but what are you going to do?
Well, we see unstable here,
Truth.
Yeah. But yeah. Here, by the way, just on where we're in the match, Bryan essentially stymied the early aggression, or stymied.
No, stymied. You did
stymied.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you did it.
I mispronounced that card so much when I started that, like, in this way. I just get it.
I need some confidence out of you. You got it, man.
It's all good.
Perfect pronunciation.
Excellent. Of course, we're talking about basic lands and pronunciation of cards because Bryan is getting this game locked up.
That's right. Yeah, this one is just about over here. Bryan, look, he had a slow start, but with the answers he had everything that he needed. The multiple Path to Exiles to, kind of set that Ravager back into a more specific mode of having counters on 1 creature, and then he used his other path to take away, there's a Arcbound Ravager. No, not anymore.
The Ravager is just a signal for value.
Yeah. Cryptic Command, counter that, draw a card.
Yeah, you can just see Shane's body language is
He's just like, whatever, man, we're done here. And he's still holding on to that mountain, isn't he?
It's actually not that silly an idea to hold on to the mountain. You just don't get that information to Bryan for the future games.
Yeah. I'm just saying he doesn't have anything in his hand of note.
Well,
here's Jace the Mind Sculptor now for Bryan Rockenbach. Hello, old friend.
Or on the top of the deck, as it turns out.
Nice to see you. You may keep that one. Of course, This is where Shane has to really put himself to the test. How much more of this can he take? Anytime your opponent fate seals you, as we call it, and lets you keep the card, it is just pure misery.
Yeah.
Now, Bryan's unlikely to get any great information at this point, though, right? Like,
I mean, you're facing Affinity. How much?
well, there's a couple of different builds of it.
Sure.
I don't know.
I mean,
My point was that he's not going to get that information, though, right? You're playing Affinity. It's like, whatever.
Right. At this point, Bryan is just working his way to winning the game. That's why he's fate sealing. Just get there quicker. Just make sure
What
your
is
opponent.
that?
That is a good question. That looks like a promo Vault Scourge, maybe.
Why is he reading it for so long?
Oh no, that's Hope of Girapur.
Yeah,
My apologies.
that's why he's reading it for so long.
Yeah, I mean it's a 1/1 that doesn't do anything. I think I would have probably just kept that on top. I know it's a weird card, but you can keep cards like that on top.
I don't know. Cards with that much text just are scary, you know. It's like
the only cards I'm worried about at this point are the cards Galvanic Blast and Cranial Plating. And even then, I'm barely... Or Etch Champion. That's another one I might be worried about.
Oh, does he have an answer for that? Maybe a Snapcaster Mage?
Yeah,
hey,
Snapcaster Cryptic.
Yeah, and that is going to do it. Shane Calloway is going to pack up his cards because Bryan Rockenbach has taken control and is one game away now from being 11-0 with white-blue control, including our old friend Jason Mind Sculptor. I love seeing that.
Yeah.
On the other side, Shane playing good old Affinity. Surprised it's doing this well, to be honest. Like, it's really taken some hits lately, right? The Field of Ruin that you see everywhere, it's taken some incidental hits from people that are worried about decks like Tron, which have seen a resurgence. And then, you know, the one card that really comes to mind is Fatal Push, right? Just being able to kill an Inkmoth or Blinkmoth Nexus is so easy now.
These are all true in a macro sense, right? Like Oblivion Stone is technically a good card against Affinity. Field of Ruin is technically a good card
Oblivion Stone
from Tron, the Tron decks, the big meta decks.
Isn't that a little slow?
Well, right, you're hitting the point. Like the big meta decks are a big reason why Affinity is doing well. Is those decks are a little too slow. Usually the Affinity deck can put enough pressure that they get there, and and when Ugin doesn't work. Wormcoil Engine is something they can circumvent easily through Arcbound Ravager tricks or evasion creatures.
Yeah. Yeah, that dream never lives.
Right, and Oblivion Stone doesn't get rid of a creature land. So if you have one of Inkmoth Nexus or Blinkmoth Nexus, they can't Oblivion Stone because it doesn't hit the land. So the Affinity decks tend to be very good against these big mana decks, unless they're like specifically red-green with Ancient Grudges. So back in 2012-13, this was different because the red-green Tron decks played Ancient Grudges and Pyroclasm, so that matchup was not great. But now it is. And that's a big reason why, apart from the fact that Affinity is just a great deck, but like why Shane has done this well this weekend, probably, most likely. To kind of set up the stage for the post-board games, these tend to post-board games usually favor the control deck, especially in this case because the plan of Spreading Seas is not one you really want against Affinity. You know, having access, being very quick, having access to Mox Opal and Springleaf Drum don't really make the Mana and Denial plan a reality. You have the Field of Ruins anyways for the creature lands. So here Bryan's going to be happy to upgrade those for cards like Blessed Alliance. The Elspeth Sun's Champion is probably too slow. Rune Halo is very good against Affinity. The second Citadel Wreckage is going to probably be very beautiful. Timely Reinforcement's also pretty good. You could also board in the Vendilion Cliques because they're a good way to deal with a Signal Pest. Just a flash flyer, dealing with a 0/1, and if your opponent plays anything post-combat, or plan to, say an Etch Champion, you can get rid of that sometimes. You can improve your own hand. So I think we're going to see Bryan take away a lot of his conditional cards, like the Logic Knot is probably going to come out. The Mana Leaks is okay, but the Spreading Seas are mostly going to come out for a lot of these one-ofs.
He's going to, Mana Leaks on the draw.
It's a good card overall because the Affinity deck post-board does slow down, and you almost always get them with it.
It is basically just a hard counter against them in most scenarios, right?
Right, unless they flood out, which you're okay with.
Right.
But you can, on Shane's side, there's actually not that much you can bring in. Bitter Blossom's a very interesting piece of technology. It can deal, pressure over time. So, Bryan has access to the Engine Spheres, but there's not that many answers to Bitter Blossom itself. Blood Moon, it's really hard to bring in Blood Moon, a deck that fundamentally has a lot of basics, but the color requirements of the deck are very high, So I haven't made a decision as to whether the card is good or not. I probably wouldn't board in more than one though, because it can be a bit clunky. I like the extra Etch Champion. I like the Master. I like basically threats that are anthems or force your opponent to deal with it a different way, and we'll definitely see the 2 Thoughtseize coming here. But yeah, both players have like kind of those standard modern deck lists in the sideboard of like 1 and 2 ofs. So you like essentially they're retuning their list because they can't change their core game plan too much to just be exactly a little better in certain matchups in different ways. So you'll see that a lot. Like decks that don't transform well usually have 1s and 2s, and decks that transform well, like say Storm, will have 3s and 4s in the sideboard because they're trying to go for a different plan.
Like a completely different, almost transformative.
Right, yeah. Exactly. So because like there's too many decks in Modern, so it's very hard to put like 4 of a card that specifically targets a matchup. The most you'll see is free, like the free Crumble to Dust. We've seen a lot of sideboards yesterday. But on average, I would say like if you see a 4 of, that's usually a deck trying to morph or like that has a very specific post-board plan. Usually you see these typically in Modern 1s and 2s because you can't morph your core deck too much. Yeah, so on the blue-white control side, lands, spells, and cheap spells, that's probably good to go. I think here Shane is debating on his hand. It looks a little land light, even with the glare. So that's going to be... That actually looks like the Mountain, which is one of the worst cards to have access to in your hand, because it means that any path to exiles won't allow you to ramp up to an earlier Etch Champion or have a tempo play.
And that'll certainly be fresh in Shane's mind after how Game 1 went.
Yeah. Shane's hands seem to have 2 Arcbound Ravagers, so I'd say with Affinity you at least want 2 mana sources though. Like there are a lot of mana sources. Like and Affinity Mulligan's okay. It's the individual value of cards is based on synergy, so that isn't a positive in its favor. But something like a Cranial Plating or an Arcbound Ravager or an Etch Champion is worth so much more than the other cards that it's worth considering mulliganing. And yeah, you can see Shane's hand a bit. There was like an Arcbound Ravager Plating, so he has a lot of the power cards, but maybe he just doesn't have the mana to deploy them, and he's wondering how much of a risk he's willing to take. I think it's Citadel and Mountain, and he's just considering like how to keep... Or Inkmoth here. Okay. Yeah, and you can see no turn 1 play.
Yeah.
So a lot of power cards. So Shane's hand's going to be a lot slower this match, and he's going to go for a much more power-heavy resilience plan. It's going to look a little less typical of Affinity and more typical of a curved deck that like goes turn 2 drop, turn 3 drop, etc.
For Bryan, he does not have Stony Silence in his board, right?
That's actually a really good spot. The blue-white decks usually morph well enough against Affinity post-board that they don't feel they need Stony Silence.
Okay.
Yeah, and also the cards you care about are more... Steel Overseer is not a card you care about too much. So at that point, it's Plating, Ravager, and Etch Champion. Etch Champion doesn't really get hit unless you get Stony right away. So a lot of people don't run the Stony for that reason. They just board in more creature removal, and it just... better.
Ooh, look at this. Spreading Seas.
I would suggest that Bryan still maybe kept 1 or 2, but it's a bit weird to see him have kept both Sphinx's Revelation and Spreading Seas. I would have thought that at least some Spreading Seas would have been shaved. And Sphinx's Revelation, is fine, but this is like...
Why do you want to shave Spreading Seas? These creature lands can be a major problem for his deck. He's got Path, but,
right. That is very true, but you have access still to 4 Field of Ruin no matter what. And
he has 4 Field of Ruin?
It's very standard in the white-blue control decks, but also like he has a Ghost Quarter.
So he has 5 lands plus the Path? Okay, yeah. I'm with Eduardo on this one. Maybe we don't need all the Spreading Seas.
Right, especially on the draw. You want to interact with Shane's board. The game here was a lot slower than it should have been. It was actually surprising that Shane went for... Plating rather than a Ravager here, but I think his plan was with the Etch Champion, I'll play Plating because that's very hard to deal with on the board.
That is the scariest card, I think, from Bryan's perspective. Like, Plating is the most explosive.
Yeah. I think Shane's plan here is Etch Champion, although he drew Mox Opal and Ornithopter to protect. But yeah, essentially here...
That was a turn.
That was indeed a turn.
Smokes.
But yeah, the plan here from Shane was I'm going to deploy this turn 2 Plating because it's not easy to deal with. So that means my Etch Champion with the Citadel and the Plating is going to have Metalcraft and be protected.
No, I can see that from Shane. Like, resolving a Cranial Plating is a big deal, and now you can see why. What is it giving? +5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Yowza.
It's actually, yeah, it's +5 indeed. Yeah, and yeah, I really like Shane's macro plan here. I actually think he got this sequencing just down pat. And he probably took all this time during his mulligan to consider that macro sequence. What is my turn one? What am I planning for this game? And he's playing this edge champion with plating from turn 1. And I'm glad to see it pay off for Shane. He really considered the plan when this is what I want to be doing, and it just worked out beautifully. And this is why I didn't understand the spreading C so much, is you don't want to tap out when your opponent can slam an edge champion.
Right. Now he's in big trouble here because Bryan's going to have to find some of his answers either for plating or for sweeping the board. It's harder to do. It's a Path to Exile need not apply, right? There's a lot of cards that just aren't outs at this point. Wow, here's a Ravager now from Shane Calloway as well. A slow start, but he has made up for it over these last 2 turns, playing some of his absolutely most threatening cards.
We also see in Shane's hand
8 damage. You're going to go to 10?
I'm just going to fire off now.
Yeah, he wants to be able to take away a potential sweeper, something like a Supreme Verdict.
Yeah, perfect. Exactly. It would have been really funny if Bryan had one of his 2 copies of Settle the Wreckage in hand. That would have been... Settle the Wreckage specifically is terrible against discard because they know you have it. So they can just wait until get another discard spell. But yeah, Bryan's hand's kind of loaded here. But it's still pretty clunky. The Path to Exile is the only card that's kind of fast. So Sphinx's Revelation is just not going to be active. And I like taking the Cryptic Command here. Jace is just a non-issue at this point.
Right. Cryptic Command actually does slow down Shane by a turn and maybe give Bryan another shot to try to find a sweeper of some sort. Yeah. So he's just going to try to force the issue here with Path to Exile. Now this just forces Shane to make some decisions about where he wants to put counters and that kind of stuff.
Right. And here it's a lot closer than in the other game as to whether he should sacrifice random artifacts because he has access to plating. So it's not free to, say, sack a Mox Opal like it was in Game 1 when he had access to no other spells. This is actually a tough one. How much do you overload on this Edge Champion? And my view is you could split with the Ornithopter, but I don't think there's much value. I think here, essentially, putting on the Ornithopter doesn't really do much. So I would like to see Shane just go put it on the champion since that's going to be his route to victory. The Ornithopter is already doing its job as just +1. It doesn't need the counter. I think just putting it on the champion here is correct. There's not that's my view. He doesn't need to sack a Mox Opal either. He could, but I don't think there's a need with plating. And
I mean the problem, of course, is that every artifact you sack to plating or you sack to the Ravager just reduces the plating by 1 anyway.
Exactly. Right. This champion needs a sweeper. There's nothing else that's going to deal with it. So here from Bryan's side, I'd like to see, let's see, how much is this? This isn't lethal next turn.
No, it's 7 damage right now.
Right.
Or 8 damage, excuse me.
Right. So you're just trying to think of the card that Shane could have in hand. But I think Bryan's going to have to ignore it, and correctly so. So here, I would like to see Bryan brainstorm with Jace.
Because and try to find a sweeper. What does he have, by the way, in the way of sweepers?
He has 4 sweepers post-board. There's 2 Settle the Wreckages, 1/1, and 2 Supreme Verdicts.
Okay.
So I would like to see Bryan. Yeah. The actual best card might be to actually Fate Seal himself here, because Shane can't afford to lose a turn killing Jace. So I think I like to see Bryan Fate Seal himself, check for a sweeper. If it's the sweeper, keep it on top. If it's not, bottom it, and then brainstorm. That allows you to see the maximum amount of cards.
I see, because you're planning on living for an extra turn anyway. If this plan doesn't work, you're dead anyway, so it doesn't matter. Right. Now, he decided just to pass a turn, it looks like, so perhaps he's going to fire off. Is it possible that he's doing Sphinx's Revelation for 1? What is his plan here?
His plan might have been to keep the path up in case he had to kill the Ornithopter or gain a life, but I think this was a little too conservative from Bryan.
He's revving for 1 here, Eduardo. That is no bueno.
Yeah, I'm not
unless, of course, he hits.
Right, but this is why I was a bigger fan of the Jace play. I know you could lose the game, but the game is not under your control.
He found a Cryptic.
Yeah, I don't know. When you're behind...
No, you're right. You would have seen 4 cards by now to try to find a legit answer to... I mean, probably just win this game, right? If he casts a sweeper here, Shane's on, 1 card, no pressure?
Right.
You're in really good shape at that point. You know, there's some outs that you could lose to, but you're in much better shape. Now, I guess he's going to Cryptic.
He can Cryptic. He can just Ghost Quarter his own Field of Ruin, and that gets him the mana he needs.
Okay.
But yeah, this turn I really would have liked Bryan to take. Last turn I would have liked Bryan to take that risk because now he's living off the top of his deck, and he gave himself less than the most optimal chance to win.
Right, because you've determined, right, that winning in this case is casting a sweeper.
Right.
That's how this game goes in Bryan's direction. But Bryan is kind of clinging to the, to the control player's notion of like just survive. And, there are routes to victory there too, and they do start with Cryptic Command, so he may be able to find his way through. But we're, of course, talking about what's the highest percentage, right?
Yes. And here it was actually, I mean, Bryan wanted to be able to gain life in case Shane had access to an artifact in hand and then another one.
Yeah.
But I think at that point you have to take the risk that it's a colored spell of some sort.
Ooh, is that Gear per Ether Grid?
Yeah, that is. And that's exactly 2 damage.
That is game. That's tap 2 artifacts, do 1 damage to something. And in this case, that something is Bryan Rockenbach's head. And that's going to do it for game number 2. So Shane Calloway even things up. And we're going to get a game number 3. Is it going to be white-blue control on the play post-sideboard here, or is it going to be the Affinity deck?
Yeah. The Ifer Grid is an interesting sideboard card we didn't discuss. I think it's a little less important when your opponent's not playing Stony Silence, which Shane would just assume Bryan has Stony Silence because he has access to white.
He's playing white, yeah. Exactly.
That said, it does give you an alternative route to victory against the control player. It is a way to efficiently deal with planeswalkers without sacrificing too much offensive power. So I kind of like it as an addition. I didn't consider it in the sideboarding, but I actually like Shane's take on it. I actually thought Shane's post-board plan was much stronger than Bryan's. I think Bryan took I would say Bryan could have taken different approaches here for the post-board games than we have seen. But I think Shane knows exactly what he's supposed to be doing, and we saw that plan be executed beautifully. I thought Shane played that post-board game beautifully. That was actually really, really strong.
Yeah, the biggest decision point I think that Shane had during that entire game was, what do I want to prioritize on turn 2 here? And he prioritized cranial plating. Even though that gave him no reasonable attack the next turn, it meant that he wasn't really doing much for the first 2 turns of the game, which, when you look at an Affinity deck, they typically have the ability to dump the better part of their hand after the end of the second turn. But he said, no, if I can stick this thing, then I'll be able to figure it out from there. And that's what happened. The third turn was explosive for him. He put 3 permanents and a land on the battlefield. And next thing you know, he had a 7-power attacker that couldn't be pat to exile.
Right, and that was exactly it. And good recognition from Shane as to what his post-board plan should be, his hand, and sequencing here.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if you've ever played Control Deck in Modern, you know that there's multiple scary threats from Affinity. It's no, you have to deal with pretty much all of the 2-drops that they play. But the cranial plating's the one that is just like, I don't have enough removal to kill every single thing that you play for the rest of the game, and plating makes every single thing you play the rest of the game a must-kill threat.
Especially the Edge champion. That's
and the champion is a must-kill threat that's really hard to kill, demands that narrow set of answers. So great stuff from Shane there, and Bryan's going to have to regroup and see if he can't find a win here. Now, he is going to be on the play. That's going to give him an advantage for sure.
Yeah, I'd like to see Bryan lose that Sphinx's Revelation and those Spreading Seas and keep that Logic Knot and Mana Leaks in. Shane, a lot of the cards you're worried about are 2 or 3 mana, especially on the play. You want to be able to interact. So I got to be honest, I dislike the Spreading Seas in Bryan's hand. It's just not advancing his game plan to a direction where he's going to take down the game.
Yeah, with so many answers for the creature lands on the other side of the battlefield, it's almost just too much.
Right. And it's hard to mana deny Shane off a collar because you have 4 Mox Opals and Drums. I mean,
right, and plus he doesn't need that many colors.
Right. Shane already removed as well the Signal Pests, which is very good recognition. I didn't see them in game 2, and I'd be surprised if we saw them in this game. And he removed them because they're just not good against sweepers. They force you to overcommit. So I believe Shane took them out, and that would have been correct. Oh, okay, good.
Hello,
we see a mana leak. Good. At least only part of the damage was done.
There you go. So now he can keep Mana Leak up here and maybe prevent Shane from building out his board further. A Vault Scourge on its own is not going to get the job done. Bryan can pretty safely just ignore that for the time being. It needs help. So, wow, that's a hand, though, for Calloway. I see 2 platings in hand for him.
Yeah, there is actually a signal pest, which still surprises me. I mean,
all right, here's Mana Leak now for the Arcbound Ravager. But the truth is that I think from Shane's perspective, that was one of those feelers where it's like, look, if this resolves, I'm happy about it. And if it doesn't, that's fine. I got a lot more firepower to back that up. He's going to chip in for 1 lifelink.
Yeah.
As Bryan did take the bait there, and kind of has to. I mean, you can't just let your opponent run roughshod over you here. So what does he have for this turn, I'm curious?
Yeah, so to kind of back on that play and what we're going to see in the future,
yeah,
you see the Mana Leak because it's what I would call a tempo force play, as in, like, it's not maybe the card you want to counter, but you have to in order to keep parity. But Bryan drew a perfect card here in that Gideon of the Trials, because that is going to force Shane to overcommit and run into the Supreme Verdict that Bryan has. So I really like the so that top deck of Gideon of the Trials was really powerful on Bryan's side. It allows him basically to have less pressure, which means Shane's gonna have to commit more to the board, and eventually Shane is going to get his board swept. However, with these 2 platings and all these creature lands, Shane is probably going to have still a lot of gas, and that could give reason to Bryan to keeping some number of spreading seas. But the main thing for me when playing against Affinity is you don't want to necessarily disable all their lands. You want to disable their tempo a lot of the time. So that's why I like Field of Ruin, but I don't like Spreading Seas. Apart from the fact that Field of Ruin taps for mana, is Field of Ruin, your opponent attacks, and then you can prevent the attack. And then your opponent's forced to regroup, so you're basically time-walking your opponent turn after turn. But yeah, and the Gideon of the Trials here is very good against those lands, very good against the Vault Scourge. It's just going to help Bryan lock this game. Without the Gideon, he was actually in a little bit of trouble.
And there's a Signal Pest. You were hoping that those came out, but they did not. Still a productive turn here for Shane as he plays Signal Pest and Cranial Plating. So meaningfully moving his board state forward.
Right. And Bryan drew another land, which is definitely not what he wants. And he has to think here, am I forced to sweep the board with this Supreme Verdict here? The answer might have to be yes, because he doesn't have a path or Field of Ruin to back up. So even though there's only 2 creatures, he's forced to sweep the board here, because otherwise his Gideon of the Trials would be lost.
Yeah, this is kind of cool, too. He gets the plus Gideon. He can name any permanent he wants, and he chose the Blinkmoth Nexus. And that is, you know, the pattern is, generally speaking, that the control decks have the ability to deal with all of the more obvious and overt threats, and then you end up losing to Blinkmoth Nexus or to Inkmoth Nexus after the dust is settled. Bryan did pack a lot of heat for these type of cards. He has 4 Field of Ruin, a Ghost Quarter, and the Path to Exiles as well. But he's also kept in Spreading Seas, so he's really covering that base to make sure that when the dust does settle, he doesn't die to some of these creature lands at the end. And these are the cards you worry about. If you're the one playing the Path to Exile deck, like I said, you end up having answers or finding ways to deal with the Ravagers and the little 1/1s and stuff like that. It's the Cranial Platings and the creature lands that end up killing you by the end of it.
It's a very
Gideon's an interesting one here too, by the way. I really like that here.
Yeah, no, it interacts very well with sweepers. So a lot of people have loved Gideon of the Trial in these lists because they force your opponent to play into your sweepers. So it increases the power of your Supreme Verdict and your Settle the Wreckage, because you have to go. Actually, I say it increases the power of Settle the Wreckage. Specifically, it makes Settle the Wreckage worse because then you don't attack with one of your threats. But it's very good against with Supreme Verdict for sure. Yeah, here, Field of Ruin, Path to Exile, Spreading Seas is very nice. The sequence Bryan can get here is Spreading seizing one of the lands, probably the Blinkmoth because it has more abilities, Field of Ruining the Inkmoth Nexus, and then having access to Path to Exile. So this is a really nice sequence. And then you can Gideon as well as Threat. But you should Gideon whichever threat you are not planning to path here. And you're kind of forced to path the Ravager on average.
Put a stop to the shenanigans that could happen.
Yeah, so I think here we're going to see the Gideon plus on Vault Scourge, which is definitely going to worry Shane. Because once they target Vault Scourge rather than Ravager, you know they have something.
Right. But, of course, when you're the Affinity player, okay, what am I going to do, right?
It's actually one of the hardest questions Affinity players have to answer. Sometimes they have the answer. But the second plating means that Bryan is going to have to deal with every one of Shane's threats. Basically, 2 platings means that every fret is going to be very important. That's where this Gideon of the Trial shines, because it deals with any 1 fret. So as long as Bryan can take Shane off having 2 frets or can tempo off the 2nd fret at any point, then Shane should be ahead. But yeah, here decides to just equip the plating attack with Ravager. But yeah, I would have liked to see the Ink Moth get activated here, since it's the most likely target for a Field of Ruin. Not that I think it matters that much. It just tells Bryan that Shane's hand is action light. Since if Shane was concerned about his mana, he probably would have tapped the Ink Moth first, since he can animate it with anything else. So I think that kind of thing tells Bryan, okay, well, you probably don't have that much action. Yeah, and Path to Exile here. Yeah, a little bit of unfortunate sequencing. You're forced to Field of Ruin first to get the planes, so you can't, say, Path to Exile the Ravager and then induce Shane into maybe making a mistake and putting the counters on an Ink Moth. So, yeah. But this is still fine. You're dealing with every threat.
Right. He's got all the threats handled now. The Gideon of the Trials has the Vault Scourge effectively locked up, and Bryan has taken out any creature lands and any other threats. So now Shane needs to be 1 threat up. And this is where, ooh, hello. How about an Etched Champion?
Etched Champion, perfect. Does not care about getting into the Trials. Does not, and with plating, a perfect threat. Yeah. And this is what the blue-white control deck should be worried about, is that Etched Champion. And I like that we saw a Logic Knock go down to Serum Visions, but I like that Bryan at least kept that in. But yeah, that's the problem, is you're like, okay, these creature lands are a problem, but then, yeah, this Etched Champion is a real issue. That said,
this is interesting. He's actually on 3 artifacts exactly, right?
Good spot. That was exactly what I was going to mention. Here, Bryan can Path to Exile the Vault Scourge and then plus Gideon on the Etched Champion, at least preventing the damage for that turn. Otherwise, we might see this Gideon go down. Bryan only has access to Path to Exile, not 2 removal spells. And he does have to get rid of this Vault Scourge. So I think I would have liked Bryan use the path on Vault Scourge. But I'm okay with Bryan deciding to take it a little slow here and trying to draw into a Supreme Verdict. Since Shane is incentivized to play out more artifacts to pump the Etched Champion, a lot of those are creatures, so it makes the sweeper more powerful. But unfortunately for Bryan, that artifact that Shane has at hand is another plating.
That's right. That's a big hit.
Right.
Wow.
So, yeah.
This got interesting.
Yeah, and if Bryan had gone for the play of pathing the Vault Scourge, then at least you would have prevented 1 turn of the Etched Champion, and that 1 turn could be the difference between you surviving and top decking that sweeper and not doing so. Because with 2 platings and an Etched Champion, Bryan is left with only Detention Sphere or his sweepers, but he has his hand is running on empty. And yeah, just exile the Vault Scourge now when, yeah, this Etched Champion's coming in. Interestingly, Shane did not run out the plating because he was scared of a Cryptic Command. One of the strengths of these control decks is they can essentially, feign having the counterspell. And especially with Hope of Girapur, this is where Shane decided, well, I don't want to run into Cryptic Command. He decides to run into it. So I'm not actually a fan of this line. If you're going to play the Cranial Plating, I think this turn you should be attacking with that, equipping it too. Because you would have killed the Gideon of the Trials. It is not maybe the most relevant threat, but might as well get it off the board because why not? I mean, now you want to attack Bryan, so this would have been a good turn to kill Gideon of the Trials and then next turn start attacking in. So at least any future threat you top deck will be relevant with those 2 platings. So I would have liked that sequence to have been plating, attacking to Gideon, and then from there on out go out. If you're going to play the Cranial Plating and not play around Cryptic Command.
So he's going to make an emblem?
Yeah, life gain.
Yeah, basically just forces Shane at some point to kill the Gideon.
Right, and that was another reason that he should, if he was going to run out the plating. I can understand like not wanting to run it into Cryptic Command if you have Hope of Girapur, because you could just use Hope of Girapur's ability. Although Gideon can just prevent that with a plus, so I think like Shane decided he is going to run into Cryptic anyways, so he should have just gone for the plating and killed the Gideon last turn. And here he's going for the like split line, so he can guarantee the kill on Gideon with Etched Champion and try to deal more damage to Bryan. Normally you just put both platings. Oh, but yeah, wow. Oh, wow.
Oh, no. Settle the wreckage from Bryan Rockenbach, and that might settle this match. Oh, Shane just says, are you serious?
Oh, wow, that power play.
Oh, my God.
What a top deck.
Settle the wreckage. Unreal rip there from Bryan. And now having that Gideon around still is looking fantastic.
Imagine if the Gideon was dead. I mean,
you said might as well get rid of it. He didn't, but boy, does it look good now.
Yeah, then this Colonnade would have been forced to trade with Ornithopter rather than just attacking in. And, oh, man.
Wow. This one has really fallen apart. Now, what does it look like for Shane Calloway to win this game? What does he need to do?
Draw Etch Champion.
Draw another Etch Champion, suit it up, and send it into the red zone multiple times. Let's see if he can do it. He's not going to have that much time to do so because, as you can see, Bryan sits back, has a little sip of his soda, and is going to start jamming with a oh, there's an Etch Champion. Hello. He found it, and now Bryan Rockenbach is going to need to find another answer.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man.
Oh, this is so – oh, Cryptic Command.
Is that what he found?
Yeah. The problem is –
Can he activate and Cryptic?
I don't believe
No, he's a land short.
Yeah, so –
Can he just jam? Can he just race?
I think here the best use of Cryptic is probably just Fog Draw card.
Okay.
You're just trying to get to a sweeper and never settle. Or even a Detention Sphere on both cranial platings does a good job of sweeping the board. Because just an Etch Champion on its own is not going to be a threat to Bryan at 18 life. So here I think Bryan's line is plus on Ornithopter because you might as well plus.
Just because it's free loyalty?
Yeah, exactly. You could actually, because the Etch Champion just block the Gideon, so there's no point in attacking.
Right.
Yeah, here Cryptic, just tap draw. Since you're not running into the Affinity's not going to top deck anything to punish you with this much mana. They sometimes run Spell Pierce, but yeah, here.
Ooh, this is a big one here. Cryptic Command, tap your team, draw a card. Now, he has a lot of ways he can actually find a win here. If he goes land into Cryptic, he could activate attack for 8 and then just do it again.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Here, the Ingolf Nexus just gets rid of with this Field of Ruin. Might as well do that. By the way, you'll notice that Bryan hasn't sacked his fetch land. Okay, he decides to do so now. But the reason Bryan may not have wanted to sack the fetch land before is, if you have Jace the Mind Sculptor in your deck, which might have come out in this matchup to be fair, it's actually really good to be able to shuffle. I wouldn't be shocked, though, if Bryan took them out since they're not at their best in a matchup like this.
I wonder if Bryan can race.
It certainly is possible. Between Gideon and Colonnade.
Right, because he needs to – he can hit with Gideon. Also, remember, Shane needs to throw some damage at Gideon at some point before he can win the game, thanks to that emblem.
Right.
It's a pretty big distraction. And remember, the platings are nice, but there are 4 total artifacts on the battlefield right now for Shane. It's not the thing where it's like they're each giving +7/+7 or whatever.
Right. I think here for a race, Shane being at 13 is actually 1 life too much.
There was another Cryptic, I believe.
Right. So.
By the way.
That's excellent. But yeah, I like here. You could do a 2-turn clock, but he doesn't have enough mana to Cryptic and Path.
Oh, yeah. Hey, we actually missed something. Shane Calloway was supposed to shuffle there, right? He got Field of Ruins.
Oh, yeah, because you're forced to.
It's a must, yeah. He should have shuffled his library. I'm assuming it's not particularly relevant, but it.
Thankfully, it has no relevance, assuming Shane's library was previously randomized.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's good practice to just shuffle. But yeah, thankfully, there's just no game issues from it. Obviously, it's still better to follow because you want to keep things consistent. But yeah, here Bryan, if Shane was at exactly 1 life less, this would have been a perfect race. But here, Bryan has to do more work. But yeah, the Springleaf Drum is not the card you want to draw in the face of Cryptic and Gideons.
And here we go. Start chaining together these Cryptic commands. That's a Snapcaster Mage.
Oh, yeah, Snapcaster Mage. Okay, yeah.
Yes, you do need to
tap that well.
Tap that correctly.
Yeah, the Snapcaster Mage here, perfect for dealing that extra damage.
Yep.
Doesn't even have to commit the Colonnade into the attack, but could. But yeah, this is all coming back from.
I mean, he just has it here, right?
Yeah, imagine if Shane had killed this Gideon earlier.
Yeah, he can just play Snapcaster Mage and just activate Gideon, activate Colonnade, and just kill him.
This is true. There are no cards. Yeah, this is actually just lethal. You're correct.
Yeah.
If you go Snapcaster Mage and attack for 10, that's it. Yeah, there's no. Yeah, I was looking at a macro plan, but indeed this would have been lethal.
Yeah, he just decided not to. Much to the his fans on the rail over here are like, no. Oh, that was great.
He just wants a perfect victory.
Yeah, he's going to get him to 1 here.
He wants to be the control player win. There's no need to Snapcaster. Let's just get rid of these planes. By the way, I mean, Bryan tapped out with a Cryptic, but I don't think there is a single card in Shane's deck that.
There's nothing that's going to get him out of this mess. That should be the game. Calloway down to 1 life with Bryan Rockenbach in full control. Settle the Wreckage is going to keep him undefeated here at GP Phoenix. He's going to be 11-0 with blue-white. And that is not the look of somebody who's about to win their match. And he just says, it's on you. And now all Bryan has to do is just attack in for the victory.
If you really want to make Shane's life miserable, just attack in with a Gideon, not even the Colonnade, because he has to block with Edge Champion that doesn't have Metalcraft.
Right. Make him chump. And that is going to do it. Bryan Rockenbach is undefeated. He's 11-0. Shane Calloway fought hard there, but he is going to pick up his first loss of the tournament. Still looking in great shape for him. Welcome back to the booth here in Phoenix. I'm Marshall Cycliffe. That's Eduardo Sajgalik. And we're bringing you Modern here from the desert. And, boy, we've got undefeated players, dropping left and right here. Maybe he's the only one left. They get narrowed down pretty quickly here.
Yeah, he should be the only one left. I think there were like 7 or 8 yesterday, so yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to take a short commercial break, but when we come back, we'll have Time Walk Magic here from Phoenix. Don't go anywhere. to the booth here at GP Phoenix. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. That's Eduardo Socjalic. Welcome. It's nice to have you along today on a beautiful Sunday here in Phoenix. We've got a modern for you. We know that's your favorite format. We get it. We love it too. And boy, do we have a sweet one here, Eduardo. We about jumped out of our seat when we saw this. Yesterday, we saw a deck that was playing both Bloodbraid Elf and Jace the Mind Sculptor, as well as a bunch of sweet ones like Coiling Oracle and stuff. This is like the next level version of that.
Right. It made an important correction. It's the same deck, but it makes one important add where, see, the previous deck only played 7 copies. And
yeah,
I really like that David Daniel went full 8. 4 Bloodbraid, 4 Chase the Mind Sculptor.
That's right. Now, on the other side of the battlefield, it's going to be Justin Baire playing humans.
Right.
And we're going to get a chance to see that on Time Walk right now. All right, we're in game number 2 as we jump in with Justin Baire and his humans deck having picked up game number 1 from David Daniel.
Yeah. So this poor sport game, it seems like David mulligans, but one of the big things that David has going for him in these poor sport games is that Justin's sideboard is not really, designed for a matchup like 4-color Saheeli, probably not on his radar for some bizarre reason. And I think only a Dismember and a Folly Guardian of Thraben might come in. However, on David Daniel's side, we have 4 Rocks Warmonk and 3 sweet, sweet Fiery Justice.
I am in love, Eduardo. It's so great. But look, it's a mirror match. Both players are just simply playing out their noble hierarchies. Now, we should also mention, by the way, for people that weren't with us yesterday to watch the other version of this deck go, this is also a Saheeli combo deck. Ooh, hello.
Yes.
This is a Saheeli combo deck as well. We mentioned the Bloodbraid Elves and the Jace the Mind Sculptors, but the way this deck actually wins is through the combo that we saw in Standard for a while, Saheeli, Rai, and Felidar Guardian.
Exactly. So essentially you copy the Saheeli Rai, well, you blink it with Felidar Guardian, the Saheeli Rai copies Felidar Guardian, and you just get infinite 1/4 attacking cat beasts. But yeah, here, basically the way this is going to develop, although you're seeing literally a mirror match, I mean, we see a spitting image of Reflector Mage here. Essentially, both players are going to aim to get board control. This is a matchup where pretty much you can tell who's winning by who has more permanence on the board. I guess the Oath of Nissa doesn't really count, but everything else is kind of relevant. David has a lot of value creatures, Justin as well, so really the player that can put the most value tends to be ahead, to have the most board control. The other interesting aspect to note here is David's life total is much more relevant than Justin. David will eventually win with his combo or having a complete overhaul of the board. Justin, not so much. He needs to put pressure. Something like a Mantis Rider is really strong, but yeah, David, I believe, has the Fiery Justice in hand.
Oh, God.
And it's very good against Phantasmal Image. I'm trying to remember some old rulings on how cards like that work with images. I believe you have to assign the damage before the spell resolves. I don't believe you can reassign. I know there was like a weird corner case because of one specific card.
I do remember that back in the day. I don't think that's true anymore. I know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah,
where you could end up like basically doing 0 to it while still targeting it and getting the damage somewhere else. But
it works with exactly Fireball because of the way that card from Alpha was printed.
Sure, but that was an exception here. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
But at any rate, he can just throw 1 damage at the Phantasmal Images and he'll be quite happy to destroy the board.
1/5 of the card is Terminate. Oh, there's the other. You're going to see David, if there is another X1 creature here.
Oh, my goodness sakes.
I was going to say, like, just 5 for 1, but this might be a little harder here.
Yeah, now he's going to have to settle for probably taking out, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would actually work. 2 for Thalia, 1 each for the images, and then 1 for the Lieutenant.
Yes.
That seems like a reasonable... Actually, you know what? That's not reasonable in any capacity.
No, it's totally reasonable.
1 card for all of those is not reasonable.
He decided to put it in his deck. It's totally reasonable.
Okay, fair enough. I'm on board.
The
Fiery Justice.
The really tough play here is, do you take the damage? Because going down to 3 against a deck with Mantis Rider is pretty... He
is at 3, by the way, because he's got to crack this Misty Rainforest and be able to, in order to have enough mana through Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, to cast the Fiery Justice.
It does, yeah, with the 2 mana creatures, that makes life easier. I think I would have liked...
I guess one of the mana creatures can chump block, but...
Yes.
Here it is, Eduardo. We'll do 1 of that, 2 to that, 1 of that, and 1 to that. Kiss your board goodbye, Justin Baire.
Yeah, we're talking about board control. I Plague Wind. How much does Plague Wind cost limited? I thought it was like 9, right?
It's supposed to be 9,
Yeah. I didn't know free was a reasonable. Oh, because they gain 5 life, right? So it's reasonable.
That's right. You gain
right. The
5.
card is balanced.
That's how it
because
works.
they gain 5 life.
Yeah. Eduardo and I are clearly game designers who've got this all sorted out. Now, interestingly, though, David does need to really start moving forward here on getting his combo going, right? Because the Birds of Paradise can block a top-decked Mantis Rider once, but he's at 1. Like, he just doesn't have a lot of wiggle room. Oh, there's half of the combo.
Yeah, and he has another Felidar Guardian in hand, so he's going to go for the Necrotal combo with Reflector Mage most likely at some point.
There's
he
a Bloodbraid Elf.
With Oath. I guess he just needs to get more value now.
He blinked the Oath of Nissa. Is that what he did?
Yeah. He could have also bounced the Noble higher to kind of reset that. But I kind of like this because David's at 1, so like if Justin attacked with both creatures, he'd be forced to chump with one of his mana creatures.
Right, of course.
So, but I think David goes for value here because he has to pull ahead and he's trying to get the combo before Justin top decks a Mantis Rider. So, it's quite close. We're just going to wait for this sped up issue to get dealt
There may
with.
be some type of question here for the judge or something, so.
Yeah, and Justin has access to that Mantis Rider in hand as well as a Meddling Mage. So Justin's deciding what's his sequence. Do I actually want to attack with the Noble Hierarch here?
Oh, there's the Mantis Rider.
Yeah, force the chump block.
Wow, so this is serious pressure now.
The Meddling Mage, I'm not sure what it named. That said, I'm pretty sure this Felidar Guardian on...
Probably Saheeli, right? What is it? Oh, I can't quite read it.
There's Bloodbraid Elf and Jace in hand. That is Saheeli Ra, I believe, yes. Which makes sense. It's one of the only ways you can lose the game from this point. So I kind of like essentially Justin naming that. This attack is very interesting because...
He's just going to blink it.
Right, but like it's his only Reflector Mage.
If he loses it, it's a disaster.
So it's really close, but yeah, Justin can't play Mantis Rider this turn, but David knows that it's coming. It is coming. There's nothing that like David can do. He needs a Birds of Paradise or some way. Yeah, and with Saheeli Ra, this is going to be really tough. I mean, he's going to just spin the wheel with Bloodbraid is my best guess because there's just no other option in hand. The Voices aren't going to do it. The Jace, I guess you could Jace and hope to draw Bird. If Bird is your only out, then technically Jace would be better. Because you see more cards, assuming like that's not the top.
Wow. And the Humans deck does take things down, and quite impressively, too. It didn't look particularly close in that game. He did need to find the Mantis Rider, to be fair, but he did, and that was going to do it. All right, well, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we're back, we'll have more live action here from Phoenix. Don't go anywhere.